Alright, so we've talked about the event, the new servant buffs, and even the new limited servant that's coming out with the event. Now we kind of have to talk about the most disappointing part of the event, and that's the free-to-play servant. Now, not to say that this free-to-play servant is bad, I think you can get some mileage out of this servant, especially if you are a newer player, because she does have those double damage mods, which can be very useful, and she is a free NP5, so she'll just naturally do some pretty decent damage. And she can even do some really nice crits. So what's the problem with this servant? Why does everybody call her like mid, or do they say that she just flat out sucks? Well, I think there's a little bit of an identity crisis with this servant, because as we'll go into it, you'll be like, oh, this servant's got like this ability, that ability, they can do all this really cool stuff that's all really, really strong. But for me personally, it's that they gave her like a single target kit, but then slapped it on an AoE servant that does not farm very well. So it's kind of like she's in the middle of both worlds. Like, she's not exactly the best boss killer. She can do well, but she's not the best. But she's also not the best farmer, right? Because they didn't really give her the kit for farming. Like, she's lacking NP gain, lacking a battery. You guys will hear me say that I think a lot of servants have this trifecta of farming, which is the card buff, and yeah, even Buster servants want that, because while they don't need it for looping their NP, they need it for damage, right? And then a battery is always very nice, just in case you miss out on that little bit of extra looping, or maybe you're farming against berserkers that don't give you as much NP refund. That can always be really helpful in just being a nice little security blanket in your farming. And then there's NP gain, which Buster servants really don't care about, and art servants are generally going to be fine without it, but I mean, they will take it, it's very nice. But quick servants really could use it, because they just don't loop as easy as some of the art servants do, and she just does not have any of that stuff. She's got like the quick buffs, and that's basically it. So she's kind of just in the middle of both of these roles, not really excelling at either. Again, you can get some value out of this servant. I know that I used her when she came out, and I found her to be kind of fun to use, but I'm always going to go with some better options. Which you might say, well, they're free-to-plays, they're not supposed to replace some of the gacha servants or anything, or there's always going to be better options in the free-to-plays, but it's not like we haven't gotten really good free-to-plays in the past, and so that makes this release in particular just a little bit disappointing, especially if you're me and you really like your saber faces. You know, maybe I'm just a little bit salty, but long intro aside, we're going to talk about this servant in today's video. If you like daily FGO content, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet, sweet daily FGO content, where your boy is always out here making sure that you are informed on the goings-on both the NA and the JP version of the game. I also stream FGO as well as some other games every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on my Twitch. Make sure you peep that in the description down below. But with all that being said, let's start actually diving into the servant so I can kind of explain what I mean. So starting off with her hits, you'll see that she's got really high NP gain at 0.9%. That ain't bad. She does only have a 4-hit AoE NP, but normally you should still kind of be able to get by with this. Thankfully, we did get some buffs like Ruler Scotty that definitely actually can help her make use of this. But if you're not going to be using her for farming, this is also going to be very good, because she has very high hit quick cards with 4 hits a pop. Now those can get some really nice refund back, especially because you should kind of be critting all over the place. That's kind of the whole name of the game with quick servants. And even though she doesn't exactly do, like, you know, the single target DPSing very well, because she's an AoE, and she doesn't exactly do the farming very well, at least because she does have an AoE NP, if you find yourself in a boss fight where there are numerous enemies, she can drop some decent stars, because again, AoE quick NP with 15% star gen is not bad. Plus, she is a foreigner, so that does mean she gets 2 stars every single turn, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you know, whenever you're in one of those scenarios where you're like, man, I have 48 stars. Oh, look at that. Bam, 2 extra stars. Now everybody gets a crit, guaranteed 50 stars. It's just literally like just a little nice to have the extra stars going in there to kind of help you with your star gen. The NP gain also will help out with that arts card as well. If you do crit on that arts card, you are going to refund a metric butt ton of your NP, because again, it's got 3 hits, which is pretty solid, and 0.9% NP gain. So that's going to be a very, very strong arts card right there. She also has the 5-hit extra attack, which, you know, even though they made this servant a little bit mid, I can give them a little bit of a pass, because as you guys know, I love my 5-hit or more extra attacks, because the extra attack is a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage. This one being 5 hits can actually get you some extra stars, which is really nice because of that 15% star gen. And the NP gain isn't going to be horrifically bad, especially if you want to level up that append skill. But yeah, that's pretty much it in regards to her hits. Let's start moving on to her actual kit, starting off with skill 1, which is going to be giving her a 30% quick and buster buff that apply for 3 times a piece for 3 turns, as well as giving her 1 hit of evasion for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. This isn't the worst skill in the world. It doesn't work as well if you're going to be using her in, say, boss battles, right? Because you may actually mess up and not be able to take full advantage of these, or you might use them a little bit earlier than if it was just a flat 3-turn buff, which again is something that I'm like, maybe this was intended for farming as well, because if it's a 3-time quick buff, I mean, you don't really care because you're only going to fire a quick card 3 times. That's going to be all 3 of your NPs. So if that was the intention, I can kind of make sense of that, but then they also give her the buster buff. I'm assuming that in case you're going to use her for some more difficult content, she can also do some really good buster crits as well, because she'll be giving herself that buster buff, and she is rocking the double quick, double buster deck. And don't let like the only 30% kind of deceive you for the quick buff. She does get something on her overcharge to bring her up to 50% whenever she fires her NP. So it's not actually that bad. It's actually quite high upon firing the NP. But the thing that kind of sucks is that the overcharge applies for the whole turn. So if you do a quick chain, you only get 1 turn of that really good quick buff, because you can just use all of your quick performance buffs, which can be a little disappointing. I will say at the very least they gave this MHX altar some metric of survivability, because the Berserker one is pretty much like no survivability at all whatsoever. Her survivability is making sure that the opponents are absolutely turned into mush. At least this one has a dodge, because Scotty does not exactly provide you with all that much survivability, so it's nice that she at least has something to work with. Again, it's a decent first skill. I don't like the whole like hit-based things. I've never really been a huge fan of those, but it's whatever. You could still get some pretty nice damage out of it, I suppose. Moving on to the second skill, this one's actually kind of nice because you're getting a big, fat 100% crit damage buff for 1 turn, which, you know, normally I wouldn't like that it's only a 1-turn thing. I'm not a huge fan of burst damage, but it is on a very low cooldown of 4 turns. So it's kind of like, all right, every couple of turns you can do some really insane crit damage, especially if, like, say, Scotty's crit skills are down. You can at least still do some very, very strong crit damage by yourself. And then she has this very interesting mechanical special damage mod that applies for 3 turns. So it's basically always going to be up if you're fighting someone with that tag. Because again, it's up for 3 turns and is only down for 4, which really means it's only down for 1 turn, right? Which is really interesting and everything, but there's not a whole lot of guys that fall under the like whole mechanical thing. So I'm like, I guess it's kind of all right. I mean, there's not a whole lot of servants, but then again, she is a foreigner, so she could pretty much fight any of these dudes. So be able to hit like most of them for like tight neutral damage. And then I guess there are a couple of different enemies you can take advantage of and like free quests. Again, if you're going to try to use her for farming, you've got like the little helter-skelter robots and like the weird assassin robot things. Like they all fall under this, and they're like somewhat common. Like I don't want to say that they're rare. I think you would fight like at least one of these guys during an event. So again, you might be able to get some usage out of it. It's definitely not as good as her other damage mod though. I will at least say that. Finally, there is her third skill. This at least allows her to double buff herself because she's giving the entire party a 20% attack buff for 3 turns and is healing everybody for 2k on a 5-turn cooldown. This ain't too bad. Like, it's just kind of like a nice little charisma. Probably could get buffed in the future to add like a 30% battery or like 30% NP gain, just something along those lines. Would be really crazy if it like charged the party's entire gauge by like 20% or gave everybody 30% NP gain. That would be a little bit nutty, but I wouldn't count on anything crazy like that happening anytime soon, especially for the Evocation Festival on JP. It doesn't look like they're going to buff those old guys, so I'm kind of losing a little bit of faith that they're going to buff some of these older people, but who knows? Just stay optimistic. Hopefully they'll buff it sometimes in the future. Maybe for Saber Wars 3 or something. I don't know. But overall, you can see that she's got like a decent kit. There's like nothing too bad here. Like I can kind of nitpick at like the whole hit base thing, but if you do time your buffs correctly, it's really not that big of a deal. You can kind of play around it. The big crit damage is nice. Mechanical special damage mod, if that was her only one, would be kind of bad, but because they gave her this weird wacky special damage mod and also pretty much made it to the point where it's always going to be up, I think that kind of makes up for it, plus, again, giving her a very strong special damage mod on her NP alongside an additional quick buff is kind of nice, plus she could double buff herself so her damage isn't too bad. It's all just kind of like neat stuff, and I mean, we'll just look at the NP, you know, 150% special damage against evil alignment enemies. That's very good. That's going to be hitting a decent chunk of people, plus, again, yeah, she has the quick buff on her overcharge. I think the only thing that I would maybe change if they wanted to buff the NP instead, which I don't think is the way to go, because I really think she needs like NP gain or a battery, so people will at least like her a little bit as a farmer, because then at least gives her some viability. Because again, even though you probably could get some success using her in more difficult content, you probably want to use your single targets over your AoEs just because they do more damage. But I think if they were going to buff the NP, they could at least make this quick buff stack, right? Because then even after your first skill wears off, you've at least stacked like 20, then 40, then 60% on the third NP. And then it's not really losing her any NP gain on her quick cards. It's not really losing her any damage, right? In fact, she's building up more and more damage. That could actually be really, really good. All in all, I think there's a lot of stuff they could do to kind of help this servant out, but if they really just want to navigate the easiest path, you just go to the third skill, give it like a 30% battery, 30% NP gain, dust your hands off, and she's probably fine after that. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Again, this is one of those servants that like I just personally use just because I like them. I really acknowledge that like they're kind of a very niche servant, and they're probably better off for players that have just started, because again, the damage mods can be good. The free NP5 can be some very nice free damage, but as soon as you start pulling for other servants, you're going to acquire better people. It also really doesn't help that we know that we're getting a crazy AoE quick servant later on this year in Saber Okita Alter, who is pretty much like, again, the trifecta of farming. She's got all of that. Like, she is pretty rock solid as a quick farmer, I'll say that much. But that is for a video for a later time. For now, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.